Now I want to talk about holding the daily scrum. This is something you're going to be doing every day, daily stand-ups, these type of things, but there's ways to do them that can be constructive and can be not constructive. So who's going to be in the daily scrum? Well, you're definitely going to have the development team. This is their meeting. And the Scrum Master can be there, but I actually want you to be able to do this without the Scrum Master. You should be able to do this yourself, but the Scrum Master should be there as much as they can to help make sure that it's going well. And then chickens. Sometimes a lot of these external managers and functional managers, they want to come to this meeting. They want to hear what's going on. And that's fine, but this meeting isn't for them. It's not a status report to them. It is something for planning for the development team. So they can come as long as they keep their questions to themselves until the team's actually done. When you're holding the daily scrum, you want to do it in the same time and place. This just cuts down a lot of the overhead. A lot of times we have team rooms that we always know are dedicated, and certain times that the team would always have that available to them, so that we know every time we go in there, we have that meeting, we have that place reserved. You don't have to worry about that. It provides that consistency. You also want to keep it to 15 minutes or less. If you're going over 15 minutes, most likely you're probably getting into too much detail. If we're really adhering to what we're doing for the sprint and talking about our sprint goals and our tasks for that and what we're working on and what we're going to work on next, that shouldn't take that long. It's when you get into the details that it does. Save that for after the meeting. Also remember, it's a planning meeting, not a status meeting. It's not reporting to the Scrum Master. It's not reporting to a functional manager. This is the team talking to each other saying, this is what I'm working on, and this is where I'm held up, and the team deciding how to address that. A planning meeting for the team. And you want to inspect your progress. You don't want to just say, oh, I got this task done, I'm working on that task. How actually did it go? Is there any impediments? Is it going as well as you thought it was? Are there new tasks that are coming up that you didn't expect? Again, part of that inspect and adapt and planning part of this meeting. You often hear the 3 questions that you ask during the daily scrum. What did you do yesterday? What are you going to do today? And do you have any impediments? And this is a great way of making sure we talk about these things, but unfortunately I'll see people get caught in the mechanics. And I'll see people stand around and they say, what did you do yesterday? And they'll say, I did such and such and such and such. Or even worse, if they're using some kind of planning tool, they might say, I worked on task 573. I'm going to work on task 870 and no impediments. You've answered your 3 questions, but I have no idea what you're working on. That doesn't actually give me any inspection. I need to know a little bit more context. So one of the things I suggest is doing something called walking the board. This is a Scrum task board. And this is just one version of one that I've used. I've seen versions that have more swim lanes or more things on them, but this is a very simplified version for our purposes today. What you have is all your user stories you've committed to in this sprint listed down the side, and they should be in the order of the priority in which you want to do them. Then in these swim lanes you put all your tasks. Everything starts in a not done state when you first come out of that sprint planning meeting, and then each daily scrum you should be updating these. So when you have your daily scrum, have it around this board, whether it's a physical board on a wall or a digital board, something, because it gives you a visual representation of the work. The person would go up and they're going to answer those 3 questions. They'll move a sticky note. This is what I did yesterday and now it's done. This is what I'm going to work on today and now it's in progress. This one is blocked and I have this impediment on it. So I can still answer the 3 questions, but the great thing is when I'm done, I can now visualize that, and there's something very tactile about actually moving something from one area to another. And even if I don't know that sprint backlog item that you're working on, I can look at it and say, oh, number 3 there, nobody started on that, even if I don't have any information about it. I can see on number 2, there's something blocking in that, even if I'm not working on it personally. So it conveys a lot of information visually and gives you some context that you wouldn't get by just saying this out loud. Another thing I like to do is when something is truly done, all the tasks are moved over, I'll actually move the story over, which makes it even more visual representation of that is done. And this is a great way to make sure that people are talking towards their sprint goals and not bringing things up like, oh, yesterday I had to go do this production issue. That's great, but that's more of an impediment. You don't need to tell me about the details of that task. That's not a task for our sprint goals. It's something outside of this, and that's trying to justify that existence. Keep it to the sprint backlog, and if you have a visual representation of your sprint backlog, such as a task board, that's easy to do. Another thing that happens is when people bring up impediments, nothing happens with them. And the Scrum Master should be there sometimes to make sure that they're picking up on this, because sometimes people will say an actual impediment, but then not do anything about it. Or they may not say this is an impediment, but you can start sensing that from what they're saying. If you see someone reporting on the same task day after day, and if we've kept these tasks very small, to 8 hours or less, if I'm reporting on the same task for 3 days, something's wrong. Are there more tasks? Is there an impediment? As a Scrum Master, you need to be sensitive to these things and pick up on these cues, because sometimes the people can't get out of the forest to see the trees. And you'll want to be able to sense these things, ask them about it, pull out these impediments, make sure you put them someplace in a list that's displayable where people can see how you're working on them and that you're resolving them. Even if it's not you as the Scrum Master who's going to resolve it, the team needs to make these visible to each other as well. So make sure you're getting those impediments and picking up on cues of an impediment that's actually underneath. Another visual representation of the work is something called a sprint burn down chart. And what a burn down chart is, over time, which is the length of the sprint, usually by days, we want to measure how many task hours do we have remaining. So when we make our first sprint backlog, we might say we have 350 hours total of tasks that we actually tasked out in our sprint backlog. At the end of the sprint, we should get down to 0 hours. We should be done. We should be able to deliver everything we promised. And you can make a trend line. So if everybody works like a robot 8 hours a day with no interruptions, that's what it should look like. Of course, that rarely happens. Some days we're doing better than others. Some things come up. We find out new stuff and have to add it to the product backlog. But you can get an idea of, are we trending on this line? Are we in trouble? Do we have too much work? Do we have too little work? Are we flatlining? You can pick this up from the burn down chart. It's a great way of conveying this information. You have to be careful though that if you have too much work in progress and a lot of things open, you might be actually doing a lot of work on those but have nothing actually done. Something else you can do with this chart is you can actually put sticky notes to identify problem areas. And you might write down impediments or other just notes, because a lot of times people come by and they see these bumps and they get worried. Why are we so far above the trend line? Put a little sticky note. Oh, we found out some new stuff, or a production issue came on. These type of things help be self-explanatory, and then people can read the chart and get that information rather than coming and having to bother the team to pick up that type of information. Another thing to remember about that type of burn down chart is it only shows hours remaining. It doesn't show work actually completed. So you're in the danger of, if you have too many things open at the same time, you can still be burning things down, but get close to the end of the sprint and have nothing actually done. So another chart is over time, of course the sprint, and each day you want to measure how many open backlog items do I have from the product backlog. So you might start with 6 product backlog items that you committed to during the sprint. And of course we want to try to get down to 0. This will look more like a stair step. There's really not a trend to this, because as you close things out, that's when this goes down. But coupled with the actual hours remaining, you can make sure, yes, hours remaining are burning down, so we're consistently working on things. And with this chart as an overlay, you can say, and we are closing things as we go along. We're not waiting to the end and closing all 6 things at one time, which is usually going to signal that you're going to swamp QA or some other downstream person at the end of the sprint. So use those in conjunction. I want to talk about using these two things as information radiators. And what an information radiator is, something that's prominently displayed that I can glance at and pick up some critical information without knowing much about your project. And the task board and the sprint burn down are great for this. And you'll pick up patterns that you'll see and say, I can understand what's going on just by viewing this backlog or task board or burn down. For instance, if you look at this one, you'll notice we have a lot of things in progress right now. I would probably be worried, do we have too many things in progress? Are we going to get these done? If this is late in the sprint, this could be a problem. We may not get everything done. With this task board, we have a problem with priority. Remember, we want to put the user stories in the order in which we want to work on them, the most valuable ones at the top. And it looks like the team cherry-picked the one at the bottom, maybe because it's really cool and it's working with new technology, or it's an easy one, so they knocked that one out. But if at the end of the sprint, we have to stop early or we don't get everything done, the most valuable thing would not be the one done. And you want to make sure you work in that order as much as possible. With the burn down, you can use that trend line to go out and identify if the team's in trouble. Here, we can see they're above the line. And just being above the line 1 day or 2 days is not a big deal. But we can see that they are trending across multiple days very high. And unless we can look at what's going on and see that there might be a significant drop-off, we might have to talk about if we can get everything done in this sprint. Conversely, you might have too little. You might say, this is great, we're going to get done early. But remember, we're in a time box. We want to try for consistency of doing the same amount each time. So this signals that we should probably have a quick ad hoc sprint planning meeting and bring some more things into the sprint, because obviously we underestimated the work. And finally, this shows that there's some stagnation. We were burning down great, and now we've kind of flattened out. If you're using a tool like TFS or version 1, a lot of times what I have to go back is remind everybody, update your stuff in the tool, because this may not reflect the actual work. They're just forgetting to update it. If it does reflect the actual work and they are updating it, then we have a problem. Either we're stuck, we're impeded, or we're adding things as quickly as we're pulling things off the backlog. And we want to see why that's happening. And you want to make sure that you react appropriately to this information. Sometimes a functional manager comes in, sees something like this, and immediately starts yelling at everybody. What's going on? Why is this happening? And if you act that way, then people will stop updating it because they don't want you to come and yell at them. And then you won't know until too late. So be open and responsive. When you see something like this, ask, what's going on? Can I help? Is there any way I can help you get over this hump and get this back on a good trend? So consuming this information is just as important as how you actually display this information.